listening to Tea with Tolkien, an online community for the Hobbit at heart. We are inspired by the works, life, and Catholic faith of J.R.R. Tolkien and strive to encourage others towards a deeper love and understanding of Tolkien's legendarium by hosting a free book club, providing free resources, and by cultivating a vibrant and positive community online. Our book club is currently wrapping up our discussion of The Fall of Númenor, edited by Brian Sibley. If you would like to join in on future discussions, you can sign up for our free book club at teawithtolkien.com/book-club to receive the link to our Discord server. We have made it to the very last section of Fall of Númenor. This is part 10 out of 10 for our book club, so this is quite exciting and very happy to everyone who has made it this far in this book. Today we are covering the 2 appendices to the book, which can be found on pages 219 through 250. Appendix A is essentially a shortened version of the Rings of Power and the Third Age, which can be found in the Silmarillion. And Appendix B contains 2 chapters from The Lost Road, in which Elendil has a dialogue with his son concerning Sauron and the fate of Númenor. Appendix A. This section comes from Of the Rings of Power and the Third Age in the Silmarillion. So where we pick up, the shards of Narsil have been brought to Isildur's heir in Imladris, and that is where they are kept. Tolkien writes, only 3 of his people came ever back over the mountains after long wandering, and of these, one was Otar, his esquire, to whose keeping he had given the shards of the sword of Elendil. Narsil was not remade in this time, and when he grew up, Valendil, his son, lived in Anúminas. As the years went on, the men of Westernesse became divided and dwindled. Eventually, there was nothing left of the great men of Númenor but a, quote, strange people wandering secretly in the wild. However, the line of Isildur remained unbroken. The realm of Gondor. The realm of Gondor endured and flourished for a time, but eventually fell into ruin. In the time of the 23rd king in the line of Meneldyl, Telemnar, a plague came from the east, and the king, his children, and many of the people of Gondor died. Minas Ithil was abandoned, and evil came once more to the Black Land as the Ringwraiths came to prepare for Sauron's return. In the time of Eärnil, the Ringwraiths came and took Minas Ithil. It was then renamed Minas Morgul, the Tower of Sorcery, and Osgiliath was deserted. Minas Anor endured and was renamed Minas Tirith, Tower of the Guard. There was built a white tower, and the white tree endured before the house of the kings. Eärnur, son of Eärnil, was the last king of Gondor. He fought in single combat in Minas Morgul, but was taken captive into the city and was never seen alive again, and he left no heir. So after this, the stewards of Gondor took up command of Gondor. They were of the house of Mardil the Faithful. And it's also mentioned here that the Rohirrim, the horsemen of the north, came to live in Rohan. In Imladris. Elrond dwelt in Imladris. Here, the heirs of Isildur were kept safe in their youth and in their old age, and so because of this, the line of Isildur did not end. As mentioned before, this is where the shards of Narsil were kept. And we also have a mention here of Círdan, the Lord of the Grey Havens. The 3 Rings of Power. During Sauron's reign, the 3 rings were not used or spoken of. The Ring of Sapphire was with Elrond in Rivendell. The Ring of Adamant was with Galadriel in Lothlorien. And the beauty and bliss of these elvish realms were preserved by the power of the rings. The elves knew that if Sauron would come again, and the one ring was found or destroyed, the power of the 3 rings would be unusable. The power of the 3 rings would fail, because if Sauron returned and the one ring was taken up by him again, they wouldn't be able to safely use the 3. And if the one ring was destroyed, the power of the 3 would be diminished. And so the elves knew that they would have to leave Middle-earth eventually because of the fating. Now over to Mirkwood. Now Mirkwood was once called Greenwood the Great before the darkness of Sauron came into the forest. As evil spread throughout the forest, Thranduil's people held it at bay in the north. The people of Mirkwood began to fear the sorcerer of Dol Guldur, but they didn't realize that he was in fact Sauron. The coming of the Istari. Tolkien writes, even as the first shadows were felt in Mirkwood, there appeared in the west of Middle-earth the Istari, whom men called the Wizards. These were messengers sent from the Valar to contest with Sauron. They did not reveal their true names, but they were given various names by different people. First we have Mithrandir, also known as Gandalf, Curanir, also known as Saruman, and Radagast. We also have a mention of others of the Astari that went into the east of Middle-earth and are not a part of this tale. The White Council. The White Council was a gathering of the wise in order to discuss the growing shadow. It included Elrond, Galadriel, and Círdan, as well as Gandalf and Saruman. Saruman was the head of the council, though Galadriel had hoped it would have been Gandalf, and Saruman was ever salty about that. Gandalf went to Dol Guldur and discovered that the sorcerer was, in fact, Sauron. He returned to Imladris, and the White Council was called. While Gandalf urged the council to act swiftly against Sauron, Saruman urged them to wait and watch, and so they did. Saruman had in secret begun to desire the ring for himself, and so he sought to delay anyone else from finding it. Now after a while, the White Council drove Sauron from Dol Guldur, and Mirkwood was free from his influence for a time. The ring is found. This is our last section in Appendix A. We learn about how Sauron fled to Mordor, where the Ringwraiths had been preparing for his coming. Now, unbeknownst to the wise, the ring was found and had been kept hidden for quite a long time. After this, it was lost and then found again, and taken into the land of the Perianath, the little people or the halflings, who dwelt in the west of Eriador. Mithrandir first learned of the ring, and with the help of the Dunedain, set a watch on the borders of the land of the Perianath. Eventually, Sauron heard a rumor of the ring, and sent for the Nazgul to retrieve it, and war began. And this section ends by saying, this tale continues in The Lord of the Rings. Appendix B. The Númenorian chapters from The Lost Road. The Lost Road is Tolkien's unfinished attempt at a time travel novel, and among other things, it contains foreshadowing themes later realized in his writings concerning the fall of Númenor. The Lost Road involved a many-layered time travel device, which was ultimately abandoned by Tolkien because he felt it was too long a way around to what he really wanted to make, which was a new version of the Atlantis legend. These chapters take place towards the end of Númenor's history, if you're looking at it from a timeline perspective. And readers will probably be confused by this section because many characters are renamed or names are swapped around. So you have Orontor, who is not Elendil's father in this, but is kind of an Amandil figure. We have Herendil, who is basically Isildur. Elendil's father is Valintil, which is a name that's eventually given to Isildur's youngest son. And then Tarkalion is meant to be Ar-Pharazôn. Now, Ar-Pharazôn's Quenya name is Tar-Kalion, but it's just spelled differently in these sections. And then Melkor is called Alcar the Radiant. So it's a little bit confusing if you're not used to this style. This is very much an unfinished tales, history of Middle-earth kind of style of Tolkien scholarship, I would say. So it was a little bit daunting for the people in our book club who were newer. But I think it sheds a lot of light on the story and the history of Númenor. So I thought it was really, really fun to read together. It's also noted that these chapters were not given titles and are therefore referred to as chapters 3 and 4. Chapter 3. Elendil walks through his garden towards the shore, troubled with thought and seeking out his son Herendil. Remember, that's basically Isildur. He is gripped with a sense of foreboding, worried by the thought of impending war. And I noted that this whole chapter has a kind of strange dreamlike quality to it. And it was suggested in our discussion that this is due to it being some sort of time travel story that Tolkien may have intended this. The main content of this chapter is a conversation between Elendil and his son Herendil. Elendil marvels that Herendil has become a young man and is no longer a child. Herendil remarks that he's troubled by his appearance because he resembles the Eldar more than the other Númenorians, and in this time it's kind of dangerous to be associated with the elves or to be called God-fearing. Or there is a discussion of the tale of Arendil, for the Númenorians say that this tale was altered by the elves, who are slaves to the lords of the West. Herendil tells his father that the Númenorians wished to do what Arendil had left undone, which is to set foot in the West and the Blessed Realm. They felt that Eärendil's work was left undone and should be taken up by the king. So this is like the king's divine right to sail to the Blessed Realm. So you can see the lies of Sauron being twisted and taking root even in the son of Elendil. All throughout this chapter, Elendil pushes back against these sentiments, counseling his son against Sauron and saying that Eärendil was but a small child when Sauron came, and he doesn't know what things were like before then, so he can't choose in ignorance. And then the rest of these 2 chapters are basically spent in instruction and of Elendil teaching his son because he doesn't want him to choose in ignorance. Eärendil emphasizes to his father that speaking out against Sauron is perilous, and so they go into their house to talk more. And inside the house, there is a character named Firiel, daughter of Orontor, who's singing this very sad song about Iluvatar. And Eärendil chastises her for singing the song freely, saying that the song is actually now sung differently, and it's sung in Melko's favor. For this, he is once again rebuked by Elendil. Chapter 4. This chapter contains another important conversation between Elendil and his son Eärendil, in which Elendil instructs Eärendil on matters of Iluvatar. The bulk of this chapter is essentially a recap of the Silmarillion as it relates to Númenor, from the creation of the world up through Númenor's creation and history. Elendil once again rebukes the lies of Alcar, or Melkor, and advises that his son should not be deceived. He says their land and wisdom were not given by Alcar, but by the Eldar and the lords of the West, and that death is not decreed by the lords, but it is a gift of the One. So we come back to the idea of death as a gift of Iluvatar. And it's worth noting that these chapters were written much, much earlier than the final product of the Silmarillion. So these are the beginnings of Tolkien's thoughts and drafts. So we can see the final product that we have now, but this is an earlier version of it that sheds a lot of light on his process and on the story itself. Eärendil asserts that the very air of the Blessed Realm gives enduring life, which is a subtle illustration of the way that Sauron has twisted truth to deceive the Númenorians. Eärendil argues that Sauron had promised to save them from death, but Elendil argues this because he's like, well, why are people still dying? Like, he's obviously not really doing what he said he's going to do. Elendil has become weary, as anyone would after arguing with their teenager, but he remains firm in his choice to resist Sauron, and he urges his son to do the same. Now, ultimately, Elendil offers his son the choice to stay or go, and Eärendil chooses to stay. These chapters place a high emphasis on the relationship between father and son as it concerns the fate of Númenor. And there's also a couple of notes mentioned at the end of this section which refer to different drafts and versions of this story. A lot of people struggled with the writing style of this story because it was written in a very Old English style where they're, saying hath and doth and all sorts of. It's a very like King James Bible type of writing. So a lot of people struggled with it, and a lot of people, in particular, who were unfamiliar with works such as the History of Middle-earth were kind of taken aback by this because it's not the final product. It's an earlier draft. And I think this isn't going to be for everyone. This is something that a lot of Tolkien fans are really, really into. We love seeing different drafts, earlier versions, the way that Tolkien has been working through the story. That's what the whole History of Middle-earth collection is. So this appendix wasn't going to be something that everyone is going to enjoy, but for Tolkien fans that are really into seeing how everything has unfolded over his lifetime, this was really insightful. And I think it adds a lot to the characters of Elendil and ultimately Isildur, because you can see them kind of working through this doubt and fear that Sauron brought to Númenor in a very tangible way. Like, I think everyone can relate to the fear of like public unrest or stepping out of line. Like, these are things that people have to go through in their own lives in terms of choosing what they're going to believe, choosing what they're going to stand for. This was a very relatable section, and I thought it was really cool, and I really appreciated that Sibley included this in the book, especially because it's kind of meant to be an all-encompassing compilation of things written about the Second Age. So I thought it was really insightful, and I really enjoyed it. But again, if this isn't your style, there's no judgment here. It's just like there's different aspects of Tolkien that appeal to different people. So I just wanted to mention that. This week we wrapped up our discussion of the book as a whole. The majority of participants in our book club were really, really into this. I know I absolutely love the concept of this book. I think it's massively impressive that he was able to compile all of this into one book. And Brian Sibley deserves a lot of recognition and a lot of praise for what he's done here. I am curious to know if anything similar is going to be done in the future. So we'll kind of have to see. But overall, I just really appreciated it. I want to say thank you to Brian Sibley and obviously thank you to Christopher Tolkien for doing so much of the work that he's done to preserve his father's legacy. We wouldn't have any of this without Christopher Tolkien. And so I just want to say thank you to him as well. I have really, really enjoyed this book club. It's been something different than what we've ever done before. Thanks again so much for listening. I would love to hear your thoughts on the Fall of Númenor in the comments, or you can find me on social media at Tea with Tolkien.